No. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Well, I know Mo and Kelly, I think this is your final class. I bet you're happy about that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm happy that you're finishing it off. That's awesome. Oh, I have a video. I have a meme to start out our class. Hold on a minute. I'm going to share my screen. Remember how to do it. Okay. So the importance of a home inspection, that's what we're going to talk about today. Did anybody notice the missing eyebrow? No, I didn't until I read that missing eyebrow, and then
Honestly, I didn't either.
there it is. So that's a I think a good illustration of how you can miss things that are fairly obvious because you're focusing on something else. How's everybody doing today?
I'm doing really good.
Doing good? Okay, awesome.
Yeah, doing good.
Oh, good.
Nice to see you all.
I'm doing good here too.
Oh, good. It's a beautiful day out there, I must say. I am going to be in Kent tomorrow. I go every month and for a visit, and then anybody who wants to meet with me there can schedule appointments or just show up. And so at lunchtime, I ran over to the store and bought some snacks because I always travel with a snack basket. That's my thing. So that was my big outing for the day. I got out of the office for a few minutes to go to Walmart. But it's very nice. But the office seems a bit warm. So I think it's supposed to cool off for the weekend though. So today we're going to be talking about home inspections and all the forms that go along with that. And there's a basic whole home inspection form, and then there are separate forms for septic and well inspections. And we're going to look at those too, because they all three of these addenda form a contingency to protect your buyer. So just a little housekeeping, a couple housekeeping items for those who haven't been here or haven't been here for a while. We do take a break about halfway through the class. And this is number 4 in the 4-part series that I give each month, the first 4 Wednesdays of the month. And we do purchase and sale part 1, purchase and sale part 2, commonly used addenda, and inspection forms in process. Once you've completed all 4 of the classes, you do get a certificate for 8 clock hours. And Kelly, I know you and Mo, this is your 4th class, so I will have Corey send out certificates for you guys. Store those in a safe place, create a side screen that is labeled continuing education real estate or whatever you want to name it, so that you can access those certificates as you complete classes and review them as you get close to your renewal date to see what you've got and what you're missing. In addition, although at your renewal you don't have to provide your class certificates, if you get a notification that you're being selected for a random audit, you will have to provide them before you can renew. So there's always that hanging over you. You do need to have that documentation.
That sounds good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you know, we used to have to provide all of our certificates and recap them on a form, like class number, school number, the name of the course, how many hours it was, how many clock hours, on a form for a renewal. And then you had to submit all your certificates as well. I guess they found it too time consuming to review all those. So now they just say, well, you kind of essentially sign an affidavit that you have completed all the required courses for your renewal, and then they may select you to provide proof of that. So it's important that you keep track of these. Every once in a while I get emails from agents, usually newer agents, that say, how many hours do I have and how many do I need? Well, you get clock hours for Ignite, you get clock hours if you take maybe a class from a title company, if you've taken at Rockwell or the CE shop. I have no way of knowing where all you've taken classes, what they are, and how many clock hours they are, except for my Forms Mastery class. So it is important to keep track of those. And I do have my side screen process where I save all my certificates to a side screen, but I also print them out because that's what we had to do before. You had to print them out and scan them in, or scan them in and PDF them or something. You could renew by mail, to the DOL too back in the day. I think you can still do that, but you need to allow extra time if you're going to send your form in by US mail. And then I keep a kind of a recap sheet for every renewal period. And I just write down the classes I've taken and how many clock hours they were. And it's very handy for me because then at a glance I can see, oh, I'm well over the hours, but oh, I haven't taken the fair housing class, so I need to sign up for that. And I just renewed my license, so which is not due for a few weeks, but the other thing to remember is that you do have to get fingerprinted. I believe it's every 6 years. So most people don't track that too well. And it's unfortunate that they don't remind you. They will send you a notice to say, time to renew your license, but they don't tell you if you need to get fingerprinted or not. And if you do need to get fingerprinted, then that can add 2 weeks to your renewal process, because you've got to make an appointment to get fingerprinted at, I don't know, a place that does that. I remember I had to go to a strip mall in Kent one time, and I think it was during COVID, and get fingerprinted, and then they get processed, and then the results get sent to the DOL. Then they have to update your file. You can see why this takes a couple extra weeks. So start early. Don't wait till the week before to check and see how you're doing. I get kind of frantic calls from people saying, I've still got 30 hours left and my license is going to expire in a week. And unfortunately, you have to dig in and get those 30 hours done. I will say that a lot of the classes online, like Rockwell, I don't know that it would take you, some of the, like when I took the core class, the current issues in real estate class, which is required for every renewal. Everything in there, I felt like, well, I'm already teaching this stuff. So, changes in forms and changes in laws and stuff like that. So I don't think it took me the full 3 hours to get through that class because I already knew all the answers. But you want to allow plenty of time to get through that process because if you let your license expire, then you will receive a cease and desist letter from the firm because you can't conduct any real estate business while you've got an expired license. So enough of a sermon on that. So let's get going on our 35, which is our inspection addendum. And feel free to make comments or ask questions as we go along. You don't have to wait for a break, or you can send me a message in the chat section. I'll try and keep an eye on that as well. So this is the inspection addendum. And this really should be recommended to every single buyer and every single purchase. There is an alternative, and that is for the buyer to waive the inspection entirely. And if they want to waive the inspection, then you must do a 35W. That it's important because this first paragraph that says that we've advised our buyer to get an inspection, but he doesn't want to, and he's not going to, he's just going to buy it as is. He hasn't relied on anything that I've said or the listing broker said or the seller said. With regard to the condition of the property, the suitability of the property for buyer's intended use, or their decision to not have an inspection. So this is an important element of indemnification, which is like protection against any legal action in the future. This form also has an option for the buyer to indicate that they've already done an inspection. Maybe they did a pre-inspection. You would have to do this, of course, with the seller's permission. And we've already done that. And yeah, everything's fine, or we want some modifications and repairs. And this also has the warning here. Well, it doesn't read like a warning, but lines 19 and 20, buyer shall not provide the inspection report or portions of the report to seller unless seller requests otherwise. So every sale transaction you're representing a buyer, you've got to have either the 35 or the 35W. You can't have nothing. You've got to have one of those, excuse me, one of those forms. I want to just put one more in my queue here. Okay. We'll talk about this guy in a minute. Okay, so this is a really powerful protection for your buyer because it makes the purchase and sale conditioned on the buyer's subjective satisfaction with the inspections of the property and improvements on the property. So the improvement on the property would be the land that the house sits on, and the improvement would be the house itself and any other outbuildings or garages or sheds or whatever. And the buyer can do any kind of inspection they want. They can do structural, mechanical, general condition, compliance with codes, hazardous materials, pests, a geotech inspection for soil instability. The general home inspection has to be performed either by the buyer or a licensed inspector, and that is state law. And you can look up inspectors' licenses. I will say that our affiliate home inspectors, they have licenses. Buyer can also get plumbers, electricians, roofers to conduct further inspections of the property. And during their that first inspection period of time that is designated here in paragraph 3, they can have as many inspections as they want. Oh, excuse me, I've got a couple more people in the waiting room. Welcome, Zeb and Dennis. Now, subjective satisfaction means that the buyer can disapprove an inspection without giving any reason. And in fact, it's really important not to share any personal reasons for their disapproval. That can really cloud the issues. And the fact is, contractually, they've got the right to disapprove and they don't have to give a reason. Probably you will know what it is. You know, sometimes it's just like, oh, we're just bit off more than we can chew, or, you know, we don't want to take on a bunch of projects, or they found something else they liked and they have this out. And it is, although it's not really designed for that kind of use, it is perfectly legal to just say, I disapprove, I don't want it, and everybody moves on. And if they do that, they've got the right to their earnest money refund. Now, the buyer's inspection of the property may include an inspection of the sewer system, which may involve running a camera down the sewer line, and that means the inspector might have to pull a toilet or something to run that sewer line. I would always check May on this. If you check nothing, it's going to default to May, but I don't like there to be any gray area on a contract, so go ahead and check May. And I would counsel you to have your buyer recommend to your buyer that they do get the sewer inspection. The side sewer line is the responsibility of the homeowner, and sometimes new constructions have flaws in it, and it may not be properly installed, or it might have something that's going to create a problem over time. There may be tree roots that have intruded. You know, materials degrade over time. Sewer line might have a crack. These can cost many thousands of dollars to repair. So it's especially if it's an old house. Say you're selling a house on Tacoma's North Slope. You've got a 100-year-old house, absolutely do that sewer line video inspection. But it's a really good safeguard even for a newer house as well. Lines moving down, lines 15 through 20 list the buyer's obligations. So they are gonna order the inspection. The inspection is gonna be performed by the inspectors of the buyer's choice, and the buyer's gonna pay for it. He can't alter the property or any improvements without obtaining seller's permission. So in other words, they can't like take down some sheetrock to see what's behind it, or they can't pull up carpet to see what's under there without seller's permission. And if something does need to be altered, like the sewer line inspector has to remove a toilet to run their line through to get a video of the sewer line, then they have to return the property to the same condition it was in before the inspection. If anything gets damaged, buyer is responsible to the seller for paying to remediate any of those damages. Now, the next paragraph is important because it establishes a deadline for the inspection timeframe. The default time is 10 days. I see that a lot. I'm not able to highlight too well today. I don't know what's going on. I would go ahead and fill in the 10 days. If you are up against a time frame where you've got a holiday weekend, like, you know, we just had 4th of July and Labor Day's coming, you might want to give a couple extra days. If you are trying to make your offer more competitive and you're wanting to tighten up your time frame, remember that if you have a time frame of 5 days or less, You do not count Saturday, Sunday, or legal holidays. If it's over 5 days, you're just counting straight calendar days. So let's look at our calendar here. If we go into mutual acceptance today and we've got, say, a 10-day inspection period. This means we've got to have our inspection done. We've got to get the report. We've got to go over it with our buyer, decide what they want to do about it, what they want to ask the seller to repair or replace, or if they want to approve it as is, or they want to disapprove and get out. And then you've got to write your response and deliver it. So that is all that all has to happen within your inspection time frame. And remember that our computation of time tells us that all deadlines expire at 9 p.m. on the last day of the time frame. So by 9 p.m. on the 10th day, you've got to have your inspection response form delivered to the listing agent. I've had a couple of really sad cases where a new broker thought that they just had to have the inspection done within that time frame. That is not true. I mean, you do have to have your inspection done, but you also have to have your response written and delivered by the deadline. So let's say we go into mutual today, the 23rd, and we've got a 10-day inspection period. So we're going to count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10th day comes on Saturday, August 2nd. That is not the day our inspection is going to expire, or our deadline is going to expire, because remember, no deadlines can expire on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. So we're going to skip the 2nd and the 3rd, and we're going to have until the 4th of August to deliver our inspection report. Now, what if we only had 5 days? Let's count it out. We're in mutual today, the 23rd. 1, 2, we're skipping the, what did I say? 5, what did I say? 5 days? Okay, 5. Okay, we're gonna, day 2 is the 25th. We're skipping Saturday and Sunday. Day 3 is the 28th. The 29th is the 4th. So our inspection response would be due to the listing agent and thus to the seller on the 30th. Does that make sense to everybody? You can always go
Yep.
back and reread your computation of time paragraph in the purchase and sale. Another thing that's real handy is there's a manual. I may have mentioned this in earlier classes, but every form pretty much in the MLS has a manual, which is step-by-step instructions on how to fill out the form. And if you go into Express Forms on the MLS site and put in the form number like 35, it will provide for you. Here, I'll show you. It will have I done this before with you guys? Okay, let's look at it. So we're in the MLS. And by the way, you've got to change your password now. I had to change my passwords this morning. So here I am in the Express Forms library. So I'm going to put in 35. I could also just put in inspection. And then that's going to pull up any form that has inspection in the title. So I know I want to look at my inspection addendum, right? So here's my form. Now, if I wanted to look at the manual, here it is, manual for Form 35. So here is our step-by-step, oh, let's go to the top. Instructions on how to fill out the forms. It's designed to be, it's designed to be used with the inspection response, explain it to the parties. Got to have a licensed inspector. What about the inspection report? Restoration of the property, oil storage tank, on-site sewage system advisory, that's the septic system, neighborhood review, post-inspection, and then it actually will take it section by section and say to you what to put in that blank. So like number 1, date of purchase and sale. Okay, there it is, number 1. And what do we put in there? We put the same date that's the top of the first page of the purchase and sale. Insert buyer seller's name, and so on. So it's, yeah, if you have a question about, wait a minute, I don't know what to put in 1A. Well, let's look at number 5. Insert the number of days the buyer has to give. Oh, I'm sorry. This agreement is conditioned on buyer's subjective satisfaction. Paragraph 1A includes the option to allow a buyer to conduct an inspection of the sewer system, which may include a video inspection of the sewer line and require the inspector to move. It just gives more explanation, right, of what the term means and what to put in that blank. So that's real handy. I know a number of really seasoned agents that will go back and review this, especially if a form has changed or if it's a new form. It's just a good resource for you guys. And I will say that a lot of phone calls that I get probably could be answered if the broker would take the time to actually read their form. It's different if they've read their form and they don't understand it. I'm happy to explain that. And sometimes they have a weird situation and maybe a form doesn't quite fit that. But anyway, just know that that manual is available for all the forms, pretty much. The ones that don't have them are just real self-explanatory. But we're going to be going through all of these anyway, so we'll be talking about them. Okay. So we talked about our time frame. 10 days is very common. Remember, this is, you've got to get the inspector out there. And a lot of them don't work weekends. So that's one of the reasons you need that 10 days. And at the end of that time period, buyer is either going to approve the inspection and their contingency is waived. They disapprove the inspection. That's your termination document. And then the buyer's contractually entitled to the refund of their earnest money. Or the buyer wants to do some additional inspections. They didn't get everything done that they wanted to. Maybe it took them 7 days to get the inspector out there, and then they decided they want to have an electrician come out and look at the panel. Or they want to have a roof inspector, or they want to get find out what's wrong with the crawl space, some special inspection they want to have additionally. Or the buyer may ask for a repair to the property or a modification to the agreement. So they might say, I want to have the gutters need to be cleaned and the roof needs to have moss removed, or they might say some of the windows the seals have failed and we want to have those windows replaced. Or they might say, I'd like $3,000 off the sales price in lieu of repairs, or I'd like $3,000 as a credit at closing in lieu of repairs. And there is a process for negotiating back and forth, and that is, we're going to look at that in paragraph 6. So this form really rules the timelines in your inspection response. And they handily give you the number of the form that you need to use to give notices and provide that inspection response. It's 35R. Think of R for response. Now this next paragraph, right? Paragraph 4 could be entitled "How to Lose Your Buyer's Contingency Without Really Trying." So if the buyer provides the inspection report, any portion of the report, or the inspector's recommendation for additional inspections without seller's written consent, their contingency is waived. They don't have it anymore. And this is harder for agents who've been in the business for a long time than for you guys, because it used to be the SOP, standard operating procedure, that we would attach the portions of the inspection report that substantiated the requests that we're making, like we need a new roof. And then we would attach the portion of the inspector's report that talked about the fact the roof had failed and had pictures of it and stuff like that. And that was, you were more likely to get your request granted if you could provide that backup, but it's different now and you cannot provide the report, any portion of the report, or the inspector's recommendation for additional inspections without seller's consent. Okay, so how does the seller provide the consent? Well, people, there's a form for that. And it is 35C. Think of C for consent. Very simple. Seller can ask for the report, the portion, only the part of the report that is relevant to the repairs that the buyer's asking for, or the modifications. Or they can ask for a copy of the inspector's recommendation for additional inspections. So it's not that unusual to have a listing agent say, hey, I got your inspection response over. Could you just send me the report, or could you send me the pictures of the roof? Or what did the inspector say about the hot water heater? Can you send me that part of the report? Sure, I can do that as soon as I get the 35C. Because if you do that, if you do it without getting this 35C back from the sign from the seller with, it's the written request and the granted permission by virtue of them signing it, you've waived your buyer's contingency. That means if they want out because of anything to do with the inspection, their earnest money's gone. It's no longer protected if they don't have their contingency in place. So real important. And, we have had, I think it's only happened twice in a few years where the buyer they wanted out and they lost their earnest money. And it creates a huge problem. And it's happened more than that in instances where we were lucky and the buyer didn't want anything done and they wanted to continue with the transaction. So it's just really important to understand this because your buyer won't understand the fine points of the contract. You have to know what's allowed and what's not and protect their contingency, which protects their earnest money, right? Any questions about that?
No questions.
Okay. The buyer can have extra time to get additional inspections. And the time, the default is 5 days if you don't fill that in. So you're going to put in however much time you think you need. It wouldn't be bad to call the electrician, call the roofer, call the, crawl space people or whatever, and find out when they can get out there so that you can, when you send over your inspection response, you can say, we can have a roofer out there on Tuesday at 2. Will that work for the seller? Or something like that. Notice that this time frame starts, the clock starts ticking for these additional inspections upon delivery. So if you deliver it at the end of your inspection time frame, you're going to get those additional days. You're going to get 5 more days. And remember, we don't count Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. If you have a 10-day inspection and you send over this notice for 5 additional days to do 5 days to do additional inspections, it's just going to be tacked on to the time frame wherever you are in your inspection time frame when you deliver the response. So it doesn't automatically start at the end of your inspection time frame. It starts when you deliver the inspection response in the form of the 35R. So what happens now, what happens in the back and forth of this inspection process? So buyers are going to ask for a few things to be fixed. And we're going to put that in our 35R and deliver it to the seller before our time, it's our time frame elapses, right? Before our deadline, before 9 o'clock on the last day. So how long does the seller have now to respond? Buyers inspected, they have a few things they want fixed, they've delivered it. When can we expect a response back from the seller? Well, 6A, line 51, it tells us that I don't know why that jumped around there. Seller has 3 days after they receive that request to say, yes, I will do everything you want, buyer. I love you, I want to close. Or they can say, I'll do some of it, but not all. Or they can say, I'm not going to do anything. Or they might say, I'll do something else. Maybe the buyer has a bunch of little things they want done, and the hassle factor is too great for the seller, and they're getting ready to move too. And they might say, hey, I don't want to have the lint cleaned out of the dryer line and the patio pressure wash and the gutters cleaned, but hey, I'll give you $1,000 at closing. How about that? So they might not want to do everything the buyer wants them to do, but they might offer a different alternative. Now, if seller says, yes, I'll do whatever you want, buyer, then your inspection is, or your contingency is satisfied and the buyer doesn't need to reply. But if they don't agree, the seller doesn't agree to do everything buyer wants, then buyer has a chance to reply to the seller's response. And guess how much time they get? Again, 3 days. It's easy to remember. So we've got 10 days on our initial inspection. The seller has 3 days to respond, and the buyer has 3 days to reply to the seller's response. And again, the options are they can accept the seller's response and the contingency is satisfied. They can agree with the seller on other remedies that the seller's proposed, or they can say, nah, that's not going to work for me. I'm disapproving and I get my earnest money back. Now, these time periods don't repeat. This is the whole process. The parties have to either reach a written agreement or a buyer must terminate by their reply deadline. If the buyer doesn't act within this time frame, then their inspection contingency is waived, in which case seller is not obligated to make any repairs or modifications. So you can't miss your deadline. So when you get into mutual and you've got an inspection time frame, get out your calendar and put your reminders on to get this done in a timely way. And you need to be reminding your buyer, okay, well, we've got 3 days to respond. That means, by Thursday at 9 p.m., I've got to have our response back over to the seller, or you won't have a contingency anymore. Real important. The parties, let's go to repairs. If the seller says, okay, I will pressure wash the driveway and clean out the gutters and clean the moss off the roof, then seller's going to pay for those things. They have to be done in a lawful way, and they have to be done at least 3 days before the closing date. Now, we've talked about some horror stories about things that aren't done, and we're doing our final walkthrough, which remember the buyer's entitled to do 5 days prior to closing. I would put 5 days here because most likely you're going to want to have, especially if it's crawl space or roof, or even replacing a hot water heater, anything. You're most likely you're going to want your buyer's inspector to come back and re-inspect to make sure everything's done properly. That may be an extra expense in the inspection, but it is well worth it because you want to make sure that things are remediated properly, that things are hooked up properly, and I don't like to get spiders in my hair, and I don't like to get on a 40-foot ladder, so I'm not going to be verifying these things. The inspector that recommended the repair needs to get out there and do it, and that's something to ask your inspector when you engage them, unless your buyer has somebody that they want to use, which is fine. They're going to look to you to recommend an inspector. You can always use one of our affiliates. You can ask your mentor, your coach, your team member. or really anybody in the office, because everybody has an inspector that they like to work with. And every time you have an inspection contingency on your contract, you're going to, this is a statewide requirement to include a 41D. Now, how am I going to remember all these forms? What is required and what's not? Well, you know what? It's in your command checklist. Some of the items are optional, some are required. So it's a matter of compliance, and you're going to get a note saying you're missing a document, or this document's incomplete on these required documents. So if you select the correct kind of transaction, and most of us are going to be selecting residential transactions, your checklist is going to contain the forms that are required and those that are optional. So what we're looking for here as we fill out this form is, and you need to fill out 3 different inspectors and the nature of their relationship with you. Have you referred them to clients in the past? Are they your brother-in-law? Do you have a financial interest in the inspection company? Is it an LLC? Are you a member of the LLC? What the state's really looking for is just to verify that you don't have a financial interest in the inspection company and you don't have a familial connection with the inspector or any of the employees at that company. So most of us are just going to say, have referred to clients in the past, or this inspector has worked with other brokers in my firm, something like that. Now, of course, if it is your uncle, then you're going to have to say, I'm related to the inspector, he's my uncle. Another, I don't know, weapon in the arsenal of consumer protection, transparency, and disclosure. And then, of course, you put in the name of the firm, your name, and sign it and date it here. And then the buyer has to sign it and date it as well. And then make sure you get that uploaded to your command file, which of course we call an opportunity. So every transaction that has a 35 on it, you have to have this 41D as well. Okay, we're almost done with 35. So the next paragraph deals with oil storage tanks, and most of them are of an age that they're going to already be decommissioned. If those decommissioning documents are not available in the supplements and listings, do request those. There's advisory here that this inspection form doesn't cover anything about septic systems. So buyer, these are heavily regulated. They're expensive to repair, so you should probably have a form to allow you to do an inspection of that on-site sewage system. So there is a form for that, 22S, the septic addendum, and we're going to talk about that in the second half of the class. And then here's another little bonus contingency for your buyer, the neighborhood review contingency. If you check this box, then they're going to have at least 3 days after mutual to check out the neighborhood. How are the traffic patterns? What's the noise like? How about parking? Any environmental or safety conditions? Is it close to a bus line? We don't, depending on the buyer's, as they say, intended use of the property, what's important to them. Maybe they want to look up the schools on the OSPI website and see what the scores are like at the neighborhood schools. Maybe they want to call the school district and find out which school their child is going to be going to. One time, well, it was when we moved back to Washington. When I was married, we lived in other parts of the country, and then we came back and we moved into a neighborhood that was just going up, a new development. And they were also building a new grade school, and so they were redrawing all the district boundaries. So I did call the school district to find out which school my children would be going to in the fall, because it was all changing. So that's often, I would say it's always important to people with school age kids that they, find out a little bit more about the school. I wouldn't volunteer a lot of information about test scores or percentages of teachers that have masters or anything like that, unless you've got a printout from the OSPI, I, it's public information about schools that details some of the facts that I just mentioned, along with, also size and other details, and encourage your buyers to do their own due diligence on the investigation of the school to see, again, what's important to them. Is it important to them that they have, I don't know, a pull-out program for gifted kids? Do they have enrichment things? So what's the sports thing? What's the music? How many kids are in the music program? Is that important to them? So anyway, they have a few days. If they do not, if they say, oh, my child's going to be going to this school, I thought they'd be going to that school. I don't want this house. After all, this creates a contingency around that neighborhood investigation. But again, the default here is 3 days. If they think they need more time than that, put in 5, put in 6. I often see, 2 or 3 days in here. It's really useful for people that are coming in from out of the area, or they don't know that particular area well. Sometimes you've got a military transferee or a corporate transferee where only one of the spouses has seen the property and the other one's coming in, um, at the end of the process of selecting the home. So it gives I recently had one deal. I actually got a call about this, I think last week, where the buyers had signed an offer, and like at the end of the week, and then over the weekend they went to do their inspection, and during the course of that, the wife was trying to back out of the driveway, and it was on a busy-ish street, and the wife just had a horrible time backing out, and she got really upset, and she didn't want the house anymore. So fortunately, they had a neighborhood review contingency, and they were within that time frame. They also had an inspection contingency, so they were able to exit the transaction, and they hadn't even deposited their earnest money yet, but if they had, they would have been entitled to get it back. So that kind of thing does happen more often than you think. Okay, so we're pretty much done with 35 and 35 W, and we've talked about 41D, and there's the W. And then this inspection and response, we're going to run through this real quick, and then we're going to take a break. So all the things we talked about in 35, here is the form to use to provide the buyer's response or request for repairs or modification. You're going to check one of these boxes depending on what the buyer wants you to do, or what the buyer wants to do. They can approve it, they can disapprove it, they can ask for additional inspections, they want modifications or repairs. Those are their options. Now, most of the time you're going to be putting in here, see Form 34 attached. And then you're going to have a blank addendum where you're going to write out the things that the buyer wants repaired or replaced. And I would just caution you not to, a couple of tips on how to write a 35R. One is don't nickel and dime the seller to death. Don't ask them to change a light bulb. Don't, there might be some deferred maintenance, fine. But first time home buyers, they will ask for every single little thing. And if you have big ticket items or safety items, here's your priority in order. Number 1, safety items. What about the electrical panel? Number 2, anything that's going to be called out on an appraisal. Are there smoke detectors? Are there CO2 detectors? Is the electrical panel not up to code? Number 3, big ticket items / things that are at the end of their life. The roof, the furnace, the heat pump, any other, maybe the stove doesn't work, or one of the, even if one of the burners doesn't work, that's not such a big thing. GFCIs, ground fault circuit interrupters. That's another thing that appraisers are going to call out, because you need to have a GFCI outlet anytime that outlet is close to water, like near the kitchen sink, near the bathroom sink. I had a friend over at my house over the weekend, and I have an outlet on my back porch. And I have a little, just a real low profile little fountain that I plug in there. And my friend said, "You really should have a GFCI for that." And I said, "Oh, feel free to install one for me, friend. I'll run right over to Home Depot and get that for you." So he didn't do it, but I'm gonna get him to do that pretty soon. Anyway, that's another thing that's gonna get called out on an appraisal. Also, earthquake straps on your hot water heater. An appraiser is always gonna call that out. So, safety items, big ticket items, appraisal items, and, if things are cosmetic, I don't like the way they painted the fourth bedroom pink. I know they have a girl, but I have all boys, and I'd really like them to paint that. The cosmetic stuff, paint is cheap. You can find them a good painter. In fact, we have an affiliate painter service, and the name of them is, and they're fairly new to us. They're called Barmac, BARMAC, and they will hold invoices until escrow. That means they'll do the work and then get paid from sellers' proceeds at closing. This is awesome, people. And they also have they partner with flooring company, windows, glass, roofing, and interior home cleaning. So they're kind of a one-stop shop for a bunch of interior and exterior services. Barmac, BARMAC. There aren't that many. There are people that will get paid out of escrow, but not all repair people, and people like, I don't know, carpenters and window providers and people who put new roofs on and stuff are willing to wait. So that's a huge benefit for us. And the lady who runs the company gave a presentation a couple weeks ago, and she was just really, really good about articulating the value to us as realtors. Okay, so that's what you want to focus on. The other tip I have for you about how to write a 35R when you're writing your Form 34 is not to focus on describing the problem. What you want to focus on is, what do you want the seller to do? So instead of saying, the siding on the south side of the house is discolored and parts of it are warped, and it appears that, it needs to be replaced, and it also will need to be repainted, and, yada, yada. No, what do you want the seller to do about it? Siding on the south side of the house shall be replaced and repaint, and painted to match the rest of the siding by a licensed and bonded painter. No, invoice, and if your buyer wants the invoice or the receipt for the work done, that's not automatic that the seller's going to provide that. That's not a contractual right that the buyer has. You have to articulate that. You have to put it in your request. Do you want the invoice for the painting work? Yes. Invoices to be provided to buyer upon completion of work. All work to be done no later than 5 days prior to closing. And as we know, we have the right to do our walkthrough 5 days prior. Okay, then after the buyer makes their request for repairs or modifications, then again, the seller has 3 days to respond, and then the buyer has 3 days to give that final reply to the seller's response. And then you're done. And we are ready for a break. So let us break until 3:15. And I will see you then.
Alrighty, sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there, I'm back. I have a new meme for you. Relevant to our discussion about inspections. So, this is kind of typical of how, people might overreact to some small things being broken. Home inspection reveals doorbell doesn't work. Better ask for all new wiring, new furnace, water softener, and a jacuzzi tub. It just makes me laugh. So, one thing you can do if there are a bunch of small things that need to be done, is you can kind of quantify that for your buyer, instead of asking for 20 things. I actually had a broker come to me, she was practically in tears because her buyer wanted, I'm not exaggerating, it was 40 items on the inspection response. And she said, I know that, the seller may just say, I'm not going to do anything and our deal's going to be dead, what am I going to do? So you have to help your buyers frame this, again, for the priorities that you have regarding safety items, appraisal items, big ticket items. And, if there's some little things that need to be done, maybe a handyman could take care of them all in half a day. We're talking a few $100s. And if you don't know where to find a handyman or painter or, an inspector or any of these things, one of the great resources for you to use, besides, asking people that, you're working with, is go on the Facebook page. People ask all the time because, we all work in a number of counties, right? And so maybe you've mostly sold in South Sound, but now you've got a listing in Ballard or something, or Snohomish or Thurston County, and your inspector, your painter, your roofer, or whatever, they have specific areas that they work in, and maybe you need, who's a good, I need new carpet installed in a house in Ocean Shores, does anybody have a recommendation for me? And people post stuff like that all day long, along with, hey, I need somebody to hold an open house for me. Or sometimes even questions about forms and that kind of thing. But it's a great resource for you. We are, oh, let me tell you how many agents strong we are. Because I just was looking at that. Okay. Federal Way, we've got 216 brokers. Kent, we have 102. Lake Washington South, which is a recent spin-off, a recent additional branch that was formed by Rosie Work and her team. Lake Washington South, they're in Renton. 34. We have 26 in Burien and 14 in Enumclaw. Who added that up as I was talking? I think it's about 400. 392. Got 392. And we're getting more all the time. We're growing. So you've got literally hundreds of people, close to 400 people on the RBN Facebook page. And one of the great things about our company is people are always willing to share their resources and solutions. So do utilize that. It's not just another channel to monitor, but it's a great resource. And there's inspirational stuff. There's updates on educational things and fun opportunities at the office. When we had our summer jams where we had a food truck come, so just last week, and they had music going in the parking lot, and they had a blood drive going on, and that kind of, we're going to go to a Rainiers game in September. There's lots of links on there, besides just classes and information. There's social stuff too, so check it out if you haven't already done so. So help your buyer write an inspection response, that is designed to address the priorities and get as much as possible for your buyer, of course. one thing I learned in a negotiation class, if you ever have a chance to take a class on negotiation, do it, because even if you just get one tip out of it, it's well worth it. And what I learned from this one class well, I've learned a bunch of things, but this is one that really stuck with me and that I used a lot was kind of the process of comparison. So it goes like this. So, dear listing agent, though there are a number of problem areas that the inspection revealed, including but not limited to the uneven sidewalk due to settling, water in the crawl space, paint needed on the south side of the house, the gutters need to be replaced, and the roof needs to be replaced. All we're asking for is a new roof, because that's the big ticket item, right? And you are really likely to this. I've used this technique before, and maybe I didn't give a perfect example, but I mean, if you've got a bunch of little things, but what you really want is the big thing, say, here, we're not going to ding you or all these little things, right? We just want this big thing. And you're much more likely to get the big thing than to say oh, we want a new roof. So let's talk a little bit about this prohibition to send the inspection report, any portion of it, or the inspector's recommendation for additional inspections over to the seller without the seller's written consent. Now after this all changed, there was a lot of conversation and legal opinions and so on around this process. And one of the main things that continues to come up around this process is, what about if the listing agent asks me on the phone or they text me about details about the request that the buyer's making? Can I can't talk to them or email them or text them about that, can I? Because I don't want to waive my buyer's inspection contingency. So what should I do? Well, there's no prohibition against the buyer's broker talking to the listing broker about the inspection request, or in fact, the report, as long as you don't copy and paste a part of the report in a text or in an email, you can talk to them about it. That verbal conversation is not prohibited. So anytime you are in doubt, though, and you want to call me and ask me about it before you actually have a conversation, or they're asking for something and you don't know if you should send it or not, just call me and we can talk it out. But basically what I want you to know is you can still talk to the listing agent about it. But just be real careful not to send them anything that those three things that I keep mentioning, the inspection report, any part of the inspection report, or the inspector's recommendation, without the seller's consent. But you can talk about the request to the listing agent and maybe say why it's important. I sold my nephew a house in Lacey. Oh gosh, I think it's maybe 5-6 years ago. And I remember I had a whole different concept on the inspection response than he did. The hot water heater was working fine, but it was older. And there were just some other little things that need to be done. And one was cleaning out the gutters. There were some other little maintenance jobs, right? And it was really interesting because I said, well, I said, I don't know that the seller's going to want to replace a hot water heater. I mean, it's got a few years left on it and it's still working fine. But, there is some deferred maintenance, like cleaning out the gutters and treating the roof for moss and power washing the driveway and, whatnot. Okay. And I said, I think we have a good chance of getting those items done. And he said, well, Aunt Susie, what I really want is a new hot water heater. And I said, well, tell me why. And he said, well, he was going to be deployed because he's in the army. And he said, I don't want my wife and baby to be here by themselves in the winter and not have hot water heater. that's something that I can't do by myself. I can clean out the gutters, I can get a power washer and do the driveway. I can't do a hot water heater by myself, and I want my family to be comfortable when I'm gone. And I said, okay, right on, yeah, I use that. I just explained to the listing agent why he wanted a new hot water heater, even though the current one was working. And guess what? I mean, Lacey is not exactly a bedroom community for JBLM, but there are a lot of military that live there, and the development they were buying into had a lot of military or retired military, and we were buying from somebody who was also in the army. And they totally understood this rationale, and we got the hot water heater. So, and that's a couple $1,000, right? So sometimes there is a backstory that you can provide that's going to make your request more compelling and understandable for the seller. And anyway, that was a good lesson for me. So sometimes your buyers can teach you stuff. Okay. Let's talk about the fun world of septic addenda and septic systems, also referred to as on-site sewage system. So anytime there's a septic system on a property, you want to have a contingency built around this. Oh, I'm noticing on my computer is 82 degrees out. Nice, it's going to be a nice evening. Okay, so this is just basically, a lot of times you will see stuff like, this might even be already in the supplements, the septic addendum, because it tells what, if it's for one property, if it's shared by multiple properties, and it says, hey, as far as the seller knows, everything's working fine, and we'll give you the maintenance records, whatever we've got within 10 days of mutual acceptance. And we're going to comply with all the local regulations that might require us as a seller to have the septic system inspected and, if needed, serviced before we close on this. And by the way, we'll pay for that, and we'll give you a copy of the inspection report within 10 days of mutual. Now, if I as a seller have already had this done within the last year, and we've got a certificate from the county or the governing body of that particular municipality or county that says, hey, everything's a-okay, we're working fine. We've got a report of system status, we've got our operating system status report, we've got our time and transfer. Different counties call that final report different names. Then if I've got that already, it's been less than a year, I can use that. So if you take a listing, and I don't have to do it all over again. If you take a listing and you've got a septic system on the property, tell your seller to go ahead and initiate that process, because it is there are a few steps to it. They have to get a county approved septic service provider to come out and inspect, repair if needed. A pump is often, often they need to have it pumped. Then they need to send their operation and maintenance report along with an application for the county's final inspection and approval to the county, and then the county sends somebody out to do the final inspection and then issue that final document that says we approve. You've got to have it before closing. And as you can imagine, it can take a couple weeks for the county to come out, do their inspection, and generate a report. Now, I mentioned those 3 different names for those final reports, and I want you to know that a lot of there are county-specific forms. Not every county in Washington has its own forms, but many do. I'm looking for my list. And so we're looking at the generic septic form that isn't specific to any county. But King, Mason, Skagit, Thurston, Kitsap, and Pierce all have their own forms. Why? Because they all, each one has a different governing body. Here's Pierce. So in Pierce's 22WW, well, how do I find these forms? Well, go back into your forms, express forms, like we did before, and we're going to put in septic. Now, see here are all my county specific forms. Easy peasy. Here's the basic one: King, Mason, Skagit, Thurston. Okay, maybe there's not one for Kitsap. Kitsap, let's try. Oh, here's Kitsap. They have their own county water and septic, so there is one for Kitsap. King, Mason, Skagit, Thurston, Kitsap, and Pierce all have their own forms. Okay, so here's, for example, the one for Pierce County. And this just details out the process of the seller getting that evaluation. And the governing body for this process in Pierce County is Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, TPCHD. And the buyer has the right to review the report of system status, and if there's something on there they don't like, they can disapprove and exit the transaction. But once the RSS is out, that means the county's approved, so it's very rare that a buyer is going to disapprove it once they get the county's okay. But if they do see something they want repaired or replaced, then the seller has 3 days after getting notice from the buyer that they're going to say, I'm going to correct those conditions. And then there's a provision here for seller providing the buyer the maintenance records. It's pretty similar. The format of all of the septic addenda are similar. It's just the names of the reports and the names of the governing bodies are different. Like King County, it's the Environmental Department of King County, and Pierce is Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, and so on. Now let's look just for, oh, there is an additional form for the King County septic form that has to be recorded at closing, and this is for the seller to fill out. And this is typically done if you, the listing agent, and you're selling a property with septic in King County, you can just send this over to escrow, and they'll probably be happy to have your seller fill it out along with closing documents and then record it at seller's cost, along with the warranty deed and any other documents that need to be recorded at closing. One thing to note for King County purchasers who are buying property with septic, there is a requirement that the buyer pay a $40 fee. I'm looking for that amount in here. I thought it was listed by the buyer. So that's going to go in their debit column on the settlement statement. Oh, set forth in the fee schedule. Yeah, well, it's used to be $40. I don't think it's changed since this form was developed. Anyway, this is something for the seller to complete. Now, what happens if the buyer does disapprove the septic inspection and they want out? There's a form for that. This is the termination document if a buyer disapproves the septic inspection report and wants out of the deal. Now, I have had about 3 really involved septic problem transactions, actually 4, in like the last 7 days. I don't know why, but they were, one is very convoluted. The buyer said that they would pay to have it fixed, and they wanted to do it before closing, and the seller, because the seller didn't want to have it fixed, and that's a big mess because it's very risky both for the buyers to spend money on doing a repair on a property they don't yet own, and 2, there's a lot of liability for the seller for letting the buyer and or their workmen to be on the property. What if somebody gets hurt? What if something else gets damaged? It's just all around a bad idea. Another question I got was, we have, seller has a, jumped through all the hoops. They got their maintenance report. It's been sent to the county, but we're supposed to close on the, let's see, what was the date? We're supposed to close on the 28th, and the county says we're not gonna get our reporter systems, or our time and transfer, because it's in Thurston. Our time and transfer report back till the 29th or 30th. We don't want to extend closing. What should we do? Can we close or can we not? Do we have to wait for that document? So there is a way around it, and even though the counties require this, I mean, remember, this is a matter of environmental health as well as public health. But if all the parties, meaning the buyers, all the buyers and the sellers, are willing to sign a document that holds harmless the listing broker, the listing firm, the selling broker, the selling firm, the escrow, everybody and their brother says, okay, we all want to close. We know that it's required to have this. We know the septic systems are notoriously heavily regulated and expensive to repair. We want to close anyway, and we're not going to hold any of you guys responsible for anything that happens after closing. We know that the county can file a notice of non-compliance, and that can cloud title. That's going to make it hard for us to refinance or resell the property, but we don't care. We just want to close on time. So I have a hold harmless agreement that I wrote when I was in escrow, and then I had our attorney fine tune it so that it's like really bulletproof. So if you ever get into a situation that your people want to close without that approval from the county, I'll just let me know what county you're in, and I'll tweak it and send it over for you to use. And that gives us, again, a legal protection against liability, because a lot of things can go wrong with these septic systems. Any questions about septic systems or process? I often send out instructions on this, most of the on the process, and most of the counties have very user-friendly websites. Like if you go on Pierce County and put in, you know, selling a property with septic, or just seller septic or septic, anything, and it'll bring up all the stuff. It'll say, here's the list of the approved providers. Here's the process. Here's what you have to do first, and then you have to do next. And this is how you submit your forms. And a lot of these now, a lot of the septic service providers, they will take they'll just say to the seller, okay, my inspection and the pumping is going to be this much. Your application fee is that much, and I will send in pay me this in a one bulk amount, and I will send my report in along with your application and fee. And then, it's a one step process, instead of the seller having to get the report and then fill out the form and then send the money in. And, that was very, I don't know, just unnecessarily complicated. So a lot of those people will do it for you, and that makes it, a lot easier. Okay. Now, finally, we're going to talk about the well addendum. And this is, you'll notice, very similar in format to the other inspection addenda. And this was redone a couple of years ago and much improved, because it now has a contingency around both water quality and water quantity. So if your buyer wants to purchase a property that has a well on it, get this contingency on there. Number of connections, and again, this says, hey, as far as I know, sellers saying to buyers, as far as I know, everything's fine. I don't have any issues. It's meets all the required standards and doesn't have any defects. Everything's cool. And I'll give you all the documents associated with the maintenance and any shared well agreements. Everything I've got, I'm going to give to you, buyer, within 5 days of mutual. And you can look everything over. And if you don't, you got 5 days, to look it over, and if you don't like what you see, you can terminate, get out with your earnest money. And paragraph 4, we move on to say, buyer, you should inspect everything to make sure that the well, water quality and supply is satisfactory. You might want to test the flow rate, test the organic and inorganic matter. So you actually have to have somebody come out and take a sample of the well water, and then it gets sent off to a lab. So you might notice that some of these timeframes, as we move forward with the quality contingency and then the quantity contingency, they're two separate ones here. They each have 15 days as a default, and you're probably going to need that because of the time it takes to schedule somebody to come out, grab the test, and then they have to send it to the lab. The lab has to test it and then generate the results, send them back. So you can see why this all takes time. And then the buyer can say, hey, the coliform levels were too high. I want that. I want that remediated by a licensed I don't know what we would call them, well expert, a company licensed to treat water. I'm blanking on the name. So, and the timeframes are real similar. You know, buyer has the 15 days to get their response in to the, it's longer than the default in a regular inspection. It's 15 instead of 10, but then the seller has 3 days to respond to the buyer's request. Buyer has 3 days to reply to seller's response. And again, it doesn't repeat. And the final part of this form talks about water rates transfer and any local requirements. Buyer is advised to consult with an expert regarding water supply requirements and water use limits for the property. Now, what's our response form look like? Well, here it is. And again, the format's real similar. We can say, yep, everything's fine. Nope, we're disapproving, or we want you to do some stuff. And we may attach a page that details out exactly what's wrong. So all the rules about providing the inspection report and portions of it and inspector's recommendation, those still apply to this inspection contingency here for the well. And then here are the places for the buyer's response. And then the seller's reply, seller's response to buyer's request, and then the buyer's reply to seller's response. So they're very similar in format. And if you do end up needing to terminate, then here's your termination document for the well addendum 90X. And you know, it's too bad they keep add forms all the time, and so they're really not sequential and everything. But you can always, if you're looking for a form and you can't find it, actually, it's not that unusual for another DB to like send me an email and say, where's the form for such and such? I can't find it. So sometimes you just need to have the right search word. So like I just put in well. Well, here's the well, and by the way, the well addendum is not county specific. It's just one, just like the inspection addendum, there's just one. It's only septic that has those county specific forms. So if you just put in well, you've got your addendum, you've got the response form, and then you've got the termination form. Just like when we put in septic, unfortunately you have most of them, but just not all. And if you're working way up north, some of the areas have very specific addenda as well. Like there's a specific disclosure, a noise disclosure for Island County, an Orcas Island additional clause addendum. But you know, the odds that you're going to be working in, you know, selling property on Orcas are not great, probably. But if you ever are working in an area that you're just not familiar, think there might be some specific forms, you don't not sure, give me a call. It's part of our agency duty to exercise reasonable care and skill. And if you don't have reasonable skill and care in a specific area, then you need to refer them to an expert who has that, or educate yourself. So for example, maybe you're a residential agent and you've got a potential lead on somebody who wants to buy a commercial office building in Bellevue. This happened not too long ago. You're a new agent. So in that case, so there are a number of things that have to happen. One would be, I would pair you up with a commercial agent. You need to join CEBA, the Commercial Brokers Association, so you have access to all their forms. And you need to work with someone on that commercial transaction, someone who can exercise reasonable care and skill. It's a learning experience for you. And then at the conclusion of that transaction, then you can choose if you want to dive into commercial world or not. But it's not something you can navigate alone the first time. And there may be times when the answer to a question, that your client has is you're going to need legal advice on that. Remember, we are only licensed to fill out the forms. We're not licensed to create them. Very difficult to write a good, legally binding, concise, and addendum. That's why there are so many forms, is so that we can use the ones that are already approved by attorneys. For example, some of the elements to writing a good legally binding addendum would be what needs to be done, who's going to do it, who's going to pay for it, what's the deadline for having it done, and what happens if it's not done. So we try not to freehand addenda. If you have a real special situation and you do need to write something up, give me a call. I'll help you, and if we need an attorney to look it over, I do have one that I can contact on these different legal matters. I don't do it real often, but once in a while we need help with a specific situation, or maybe it's some kind of a claim. We might need a cease and desist letter. Just talking to an agent yesterday who was concerned about a very a potential client who is very erratic and was concerned about potentially having whether they worked with them or not, getting negative comments on social media. And that has happened a couple times in the last few years. And each time that has happened, because the posts were inflammatory and untrue and prejudicial. And each time I had our attorney write a cease and desist letter to the person who had put up the post. And each time it worked, they took the post down. So don't, if you feel like you're getting into deep water and you need help, you need to call me. And even if you've made a mistake, you got to call me and let me know, so that, most things have a process. We can work through it together. And that's a big part of my job, is counseling and compliance. So just remember, that's what I'm here for. Okay, what questions do you have for me about inspections? Oh, let's see if we have any more memes.
No questions here from me.
No? Oh, I like this one. This is just a general one. Does anybody know who said the customer's always right? I want to say it was John Wanamaker. He had a chain of department stores in Philadelphia, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I just like that one in general. And then this is also a good one. Jackie Chan, the moment you realize you should have ordered that home inspection. You know, if you ever have a buyer who says, oh, I don't want to spend, you know, $700 on a home inspection, you know, I'm sure it's fine. It's a new house and, you know, just remind them that, you know, hey, this is what I said to my clients. I said, you're spending $700,000 on a house. Isn't it worth 700 to know what you're in for? You know, I'm not qualified to tell you the age of the hot water heater, if the furnace has been serviced, what the crawl space looks like, if it needs a new vapor barrier, if there's rodent activity, the shape of the roof, the quality of the siding. They notice, just like that first meme we had, they notice things that we're not going to notice. They'll go around and test all the outlets. They'll measure the water flow and the temperature. They'll test all the burners on the stove. They'll run the washing machine. They will evaluate the grading in the yard. They, you know, many elements of the home, as well as, you know, all the systems and all the appliances. And even if there are things that you're not going to ask the seller for, maybe the roof is 10 years old and it's you know, asphalt composition, and those last about 20 years. So if it's 10 years old, that means you need to be budgeting for a new roof over the next 10 years. That's going to be a lot easier on you than all of a sudden having a big leak and then having to come up with $17,000 for a new roof. So information is power, and I want you to know as much as you can about the house and about the systems so that first of all, you can live there comfortably and safely, and then you can budget for future expenses, and it makes it a lot better homeowners experience than having a crisis that is going to have a big price tag on it. And that usually worked, you know, just kind of say you're going to be spending this many hundreds of thousands versus here's a few hundred to spend to make sure that you know what's going on with the house. Okay, well, I'm going to give you a big 8 minutes back on your day. So today, because it's 8 minutes to 4. So today we had 3 people who finished their Farms Mastery series, and it's Kelly and Mo and Azeb. So great job, you guys. We'll get those
Thank
certificates
you.
to you. Thank you so much for being great students and getting the whole series completed. I hope you got some good information. It's going to serve you well. And for the rest of you, I hope to see you the next time. Oh, remember, next Wednesday is the 5th Wednesday of the month, so there's no forms class that day. Take care, you guys.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take care. Thank you.